In this footage, Milly Dowler is 13 years old, and just hours later she is abducted on her way home. But all attempts to find her aren't in vain, and after 181 days of searching, the family learns that Milly is dead. Killed the girl at first glance unremarkable local laborer named Levi Bellfield, but as it turns out later, the man turned out to be a dangerous maniac guilty of a series of murders for 3 life terms. All these crimes could have remained unsolved, if not for one event, which you will learn about by watching this clip to the end.
The man is a monster.
A truly cloudy day for the Dowler family was Thursday, March 21, 2002. That's when Milly went to Heathside School in Weybridge in the morning. At 3:07 p.m. classes ended, and together with her school friend Danielle walked to the Weybridge train station. This was the only time the security footage captured the schoolgirls. As Danielle later said, they were both in good spirits that day, joking around a lot and didn't want to go home so early. So the girls got off the train at Walton-on-Thames station, although Milly lived 1 station away from there, Hersham. Afterwards, Milly and Danielle went to the station cafe to have a snack of fries. There they met some first graders, on the phone of one of whom Milly subsequently used to call home. At 3:47 p.m., she made a call to her father and informed him that she would be home in a half hour. Almost immediately thereafter, Danielle's sister visited the cafe and informed her that it was time for them to go home. When asked by her friend if she would be okay if she went home on her own, Milly laughed and assured her that she would be fine.
I said to her, will you be all right walking home on your own? We were all looked after each other, but we live in a nice area. It was broad daylight. She was walking along a main road. Obviously I double-checked with her, and the question itself seemed silly. She laughed and just said, don't be ridiculous, I'll be absolutely fine. There was no reason why she shouldn't have been.
The girls then left the cafe and separated at 4:05 p.m. 3 minutes later, Milly was spotted by another of her classmates. Catherine Lawn was waiting for her bus at the stop on the opposite side of Station Avenue when Milly walked past her. Literally 30 seconds later, Milly waited for her route and entered the bus. At her words, she paid the fare and walked to the nearest available seat. Looking out the window for Milly, she found her nowhere to be found. That seemed strange to her, for the street was empty and well screened. There were no stores or cafes nearby where Milly could have gone so quickly. Catherine knew the route well.
I was just there waiting for my bus, and Milly was walking on the other side of the road. It must have been within 30 seconds, maybe up to a minute, that my bus came round to pick me up. I looked out for her, and I didn't see her. At the time, obviously didn't think too much of it, thought it was a bit strange. I would have seen her walking if her intention was to go home. But at that time, you don't really think too much into it.
Around 5 in the evening, the girl's older sister Gemma came home and didn't find her at home, so she called her father.
And then I got in at about, I think it was like 5 o'clock. Dad was in the office working, and I was like, where's Milly? And then he was like, oh, she's supposed to be home by now. I thought you would have picked her up. And then that's as soon as I heard Dad say she's not home, I was just like, oh God. I knew as soon as, I don't know whether it was like sisterly instinct, but I definitely knew I was never going to see her again.
They expected a little hope that the girl might have been delayed somewhere on the road or visiting friends, but it was 7 o'clock in the evening and Milly still hadn't returned. The call sparked a widespread investigation across the country. The police immediately launched a search for the girl involving about 100 officers. For 7 days, police officers surveyed the fields with the help of helicopters. Special units combed the streets and rivers, but there were no results. Detectives who had solved the high-profile murder of 9-year-old Sarah Payne 2 years earlier and had experience in finding children were called in to help. A week after Milly's disappearance, the police issued a statement saying that there was no indication that the girl had experienced any violence or had been forced into the car. They relied on the fact that Milly disappeared on an ordinary weekday, when there were a lot of passing cars around, including the bus on which Catherine was traveling. None of the witnesses reported any altercations on the road, no screaming or any suspicious events at all. Police began examining surveillance footage in hopes that Milly had gotten into some sort of vehicle on her own. They noticed a car that had stopped on security footage and appealed for information, but the driver quickly came forward. It was a mother and son, and they had no knowledge of what happened to Milly.
We obviously put the appeal out in the media for that person to come forward, and they actually phoned up that day and identified themselves, and it actually turned out to be a mum and son innocently in Station Avenue. I think they were going to an estate agent's about a property, so yeah, very quickly it wasn't Milly and it wasn't what we were looking for.
Months of searching led to nothing until the Dowler family received the most devastating news some 6 months later. On the 18th of September 2002, any hope of finding Milly alive was shattered. Mushroom pickers discovered remains in Yateley Heath Woods near Yateley in Hampshire. The remains were so badly decomposed that dental records were required to identify that they were the remains of Milly Dowler. Due to the decomposition, the cause of death could not be determined. There were no clues as to what happened to Milly either. Her clothes and her belongings were missing. The police looked again at the last place Milly was seen alive. They knew she left the coffee shop and walked past a bus stop, but by all accounts did not make it as far as security footage at the end of the street, so they needed to establish if she had perhaps taken a lift with someone she knew or if she had been abducted. And then something happened that no one could have foreseen. By chance, in 2004, an officer from Surrey transferred to a new station. He was investigating women who had been murdered and assaulted in the area and noticed that the circumstances of some of the cases were similar to Milly's case. One man who was being questioned in relation to them was a man called Levi Bellfield. He looked at his file to see where Levi lived when Milly went missing, and to his astonishment, he lived just over 50 yards from where Milly was last seen. Levi Bellfield lived with his girlfriend Emma Mills at the time. She confirmed to police that on the day Milly went missing, she did not know where Levi was. He came home that night between 10 and 11 p.m. She thought he was wearing different clothes than he had on earlier in the day, and he left the flat again just before 4 a.m. Emma further confirmed that at the time, Levi drove a red Daewoo Dexia. Police looked back through the CCTV footage, and there it was. A red Daewoo Dexia drove past at 4:32 p.m. That car was reported missing 8 days later and was never found. It was later revealed that the house Levi lived in was almost one of the first places the police visited in the early days of the search for Milly. The police counted about 11 visits, but never opened the door. That little detail kept investigators searching for the killer for 2.5 years and allowed Bellfield to take the lives of several more innocent girls. The first victim was Milly Dowler, a 22-year-old student from France. The girl was found in Twickenham Green Park on August 19, 2004, but died in hospital without regaining consciousness. The cause of death was a severe head injury. Who was found dead in February 2003. Again, the same story. The girl was walking home alone at night in the dark and received a severe blow to the head. The body was found near where Milly Dowler was found. One victim managed to survive the encounter. On May 24, 2004, an 18-year-old girl was on vacation with her friends. When she decided to take the bus home, she remembered that she had gone to the bus stop alone. It was pitch black outside and she saw a car that had stopped. The strange thing was that the car was on, but the interior was as dark as the street. It made the girl feel creepy, and she didn't want to pass the car. And at that time, the driver turned on the headlights sharply.
I do remember feeling the impact, just being completely winded. When it first hit me, I don't even know if I made any sound, I think barely. It then sort of reversed straight back over the same area until it was completely over my body. I just felt completely crushed, like as if you were in a vice, but instead, it was a car on a pavement.
However, Kate was not only not dead, but was able to call the emergency services and get help. She made a full recovery in hospital and 2 weeks later was able to provide an accurate description of the car. It was a white car with tinted windows and a broken mirror on the side. The police reviewed the footage from the camera on the bus Kate was on and saw the same car that had been following her for a long time. They later managed to find out the make of the car, and to their surprise they discovered that a similar car had been chasing the buses in which both previous victims had been traveling. The fact that Bellfield owned a white Toyota as similar to the wanted car as possible was no surprise to anyone. The police were sure they had the right man. He was arrested and finally questioned in the Milly Dowler case. He made no comment during the interrogation.
Levi Bellfield have anything to do with the kidnap and murder of Milly Dowler?
No comment.
Bellfield answered all questions coldly without comment, but after a few hours of questioning it became noticeable that he was getting very nervous. His gesticulation resembled a nervous tic, and at one point he began to sweat profusely and even took off his sweater. The police still didn't have enough evidence, and they decided to contact his ex-girlfriend Emma Mills. She lived with him in the same apartment 100 yards away from where Milly disappeared. Emma reported that that day Bellfield returned to their home around 11 p.m. not wearing the same clothes he had left in the morning. He went to bed quietly, but then suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and said he wanted to go back to the apartment, so he took his dogs and left close to 3 a.m. Emma also remembered that she had not found their sheet when she moved, to which Bellfield replied that the dogs had chewed it up. In fact, nothing creepy had occurred to the woman at the time. She was convinced that Bellfield was just cheating on her and had thrown the sheet away after his mistress. For the same reason, he was always disappearing somewhere and never told her anything. Interrogation of Bellfield's other partner finally convinced the detectives that it was he who killed Milly Dowler. He was convicted of their murders in 2008 and sentenced to life. But Walton police had a long way to go to convict Bellfield of Milly Dowler's murder. After 2 more years of hard work, detectives managed to gather all the evidence against serial killer Levi Bellfield. Key to the case was an analysis of the area where he lived and the specific location where Milly's life was cut short in an incredible 30 seconds.
The actual flat area is surrounded by really high hedges, and there's a little pathway walk through that leads onto Station Avenue. I've stood there myself, and you are completely shrouded by the bush fencing so that people can't actually see you standing there. and you get a perfect view of Walton Railway Station and the people coming and going about their daily business.
On March 30, 2010, Bellfield was formally charged with the kidnapping and murder of Milly Dowler. The trial began on May 10, 2011 in the Central Criminal Court and ended on June 23. The jury found him guilty, and the next day Bellfield received another life sentence. After 5 years, on January 27, 2016, Coral County Police announced that Bellfield had confessed to kidnapping, raping, and killing Milly. This came after another arrest was made in the case and Bellfield was questioned if he had an accomplice.